Hi everyone, and welcome to this quick discussion on one of the topics of oral communication class. And this is the barriers to effective communication. Isn't it ironic? Because one of the reasons I'm uploading videos for my classes is because of barriers to communication, like internet connection. The internet connection is the medium that is going to hinder us from sending and receiving messages to each other, between student and teacher. And well, I'm uploading this for everybody to review for the any upcoming exam and well, for further information as well. Of course, I encourage you to search further online. There are a lot of resources there, and aside from searching online, what I did is to refer also to our reference book here at STI, and these are just a few, hopefully simple explanations related to that particular lesson. So, ready? Let's go! So here we are. This is going to be a quick discussion on the barriers to effective communication. Take note of the keyword effective, because communication can take place anytime as long as there is a sender, message, and receiver, right? But it may not always be effective. So with these barriers, it is possible that the receiver would misinterpret or misunderstand the message of the sender. So let's check it out. We have the SNCR model of communication. This is by David Berlow, and you may check out more resources online. If you take a look at the source and the receiver here in this particular slide, there are same factors under them, because these ones could affect the communication process itself. See, you have communication skills. So the great thing about the word skill is that it's something that can be learned and developed. So if you don't consider yourself as a good communicator at this point, don't worry, because you still have the opportunity to practice and become a good one. So when we say communication skills, this talks about the ability of the person to construct a grammatically correct sentence, use the proper words or vocabulary to deliver his or her message, or it could also be proper pronunciation of words, because sometimes a mispronunciation of a word could also be a factor in miscommunication or misunderstanding. Second, you have attitude. Let's be honest, if the person you're talking to is a snob, or the person you're talking to is known to be a close-minded individual, you as the sender would hesitate in saying something to that person, right? And that is where attitude could be a factor. In like manner, if you don't really like the person you are talking to and you have to say something to that person, it is also possible that you would not really take much time or make much effort to explain very well to that person, because, well, you don't like the person, right? So attitude, there's so many factors that affects attitude, but definitely your emotions, your perception of the person you are talking to, of the behavior, personality, and attitude of the person you are talking to could be a barrier to the communication process. The third one is knowledge. Well, if you're not familiar about a certain topic, most likely you don't have much to say about it, right? And that is the struggle in impromptu speaking, right? Which in oral communication class, you have to challenge yourselves to try later on. But definitely, if you're not familiar with the topic, for example, you're with a group of friends and they're talking about current events and you haven't watched the news, most likely you have nothing much to say or contribute to the discussion. So knowledge is definitely a factor in communication. Fourth one, you have social system and culture. Let's discuss that in a cluster. There are some cultures where the position in the social system or in the society is a big factor in how you talk to them or how you communicate to them, right? So at the same time, if you feel inferior, you feel like you are not in the same level as the person you are talking to, then it's possible that you would hesitate in saying something in fear of sounding impolite, or it's also possible that you would actually not dare to talk to that person, right? So social system, depending on the culture of individuals, would definitely matter in the communication process. In culture, we all know that there are some terms that is used in another culture that could be for them natural, normal, but for other cultures it's offending, right? So if you're not familiar with the background of that person, the culture that the person grew up in, you might end up saying something that will offend the person. For example, you have different backgrounds. This person is traditional or conventional, we say, and you are liberal, and you're used to saying your words straight to the point without really thinking if it's going to offend the person. But this person grew up in a culture where you need to think first and you have to consider what you're going to say, then it's possible that conflict may arise. So that's the SMCR model of communication, just focusing on the barriers in this particular model. In this next slide, we have here problems that emanate from the source or the speaker. And you would notice from the 3 slides that they have similar explanation. It's just that they clustered ideas differently. So here you have only 4. The first one here is problems in language or proficiency skill, which is pretty much the same as when I discussed communication skills earlier. So the proficiency in a language, especially, for example, in the Philippines, English is not the first language of a lot of people. So there is always a hesitation on being able to communicate to a foreigner, for example, especially if you have to communicate in straight English. You have to be mindful of, am I using the correct grammar? Did I say my sentence right? Did I pronounce it right? So that's still part of proficiency in language. Lack of sensitivity to the receiver's background. This is, I think, somehow related to our discussion on social system and culture earlier, wherein we have to adjust the way we communicate with certain individuals depending on their background as well. Background could even go down to age. For example, you're trying to explain to a 5-year-old. It's different when you're explaining to someone of the same age as you. For example, you're 25, then you explain it how a 25-year-old will understand the topic that you're discussing, right? But if you have to explain something to a 5-year-old, you have to make your vocabulary simpler, you have to make your sentences simpler in such a way that it will easily explain what you mean to the child, and the child will not have too much questions about what you're talking about as well. So that's also part of background. Lack of preparation is the third one here, and well, in most situations in life, I believe that there are more impromptu situations than prepared situations. But the lack of preparation are instances where you have the time to prepare. For example, you're invited to speak in front of an audience, or in class, you're going to make a report. Preparation is key for you to have the confidence to deliver your message, right? So definitely you have to take note of your audience. Why were you invited to speak in that particular event? Is it a graduation? Are you supposed to inspire the students? Or if this is a class report, how are you supposed to deliver your report? Are you supposed to explain the topic that is given to you, or are you simply supposed to read on it and give your opinion? So the lack of preparation for a particular speaking situation could be a barrier on your end as well, and same as the receiver. And the fourth one is negative perception of self or emotional problems. Well, if you had a history of being embarrassed, for example, in the past in front of a crowd, most likely you will develop what we call stage fright, or the lack of self-confidence in speaking in front. And if you lack the confidence and you're forced to speak in front of a lot of people, what's going to be the result? Most likely, if you're not able to control your nervousness, you could stammer, your mind could go blank because of the stage fright. And definitely this is a barrier to communication, because the message that you're supposed to be delivering would be cut or would not be delivered in such a way that you want it to, because there is already a hesitation right there. At the same time, if you're not in the mood to say something, or you're not really in the proper emotional state to deliver a message in front of a crowd, for example, you just came from a heartbreak, then most likely you will deliver your message in a manner that is sad, depressed. And what if your topic is something that should be presented with energy? That will be a barrier to communication, right? So emotional factors are actually also barriers to communication. In this third slide, these are barriers to communication by B. Tunney, and this was, I think, a source taken from 2014, so just check it out. So I'm writing down the names here in particular so you can search them online as well. And only three categories here, or three general terms used. Language barrier, similar to communication skill and proficiency in the language from the previous two slides. Systematic barrier, this is where this is where regional accent could come in, or mispronunciation because of where you came from. That's systematic barrier. And for example, your background as well as an individual. For example, you come from the medical field, or you studied law and you incidentally use jargons or words that are used only in the medical field or in law in a regular conversation, then that could also be a barrier. And the third one is attitudinal barrier, which we have already discussed earlier. So definitely your emotional state, your perception of the person you're talking to, your personal attitude, these are also barriers in communicating ourselves to others. Okay, so these are the barriers to communication that I am going to present today. And like I always say to anyone who is asking me about, or who asks me about communication is not optional, as they say, and it's important for us to develop the skill in properly delivering our messages to other people, because good communication equals better relationships with others. And that is the reason why we discuss barriers to communication, so that we can overcome these barriers. We can do our best to do away with these barriers so that we can have effective communication. And that is our lesson for today. Take note. You can always do further research, and the explanations that I have given and examples that I have presented today are not the only ways to explain this particular lesson. But if you'd like more information, please check out other books and other references that could help you understand this particular lesson. So let's keep on communicating effectively to other people. See you in the next class.